Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the darkest secrets of Elden Ring's forbidden magic. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next adventure. Death sorceries in Elden Ring scale purely with intelligence. This represents the academic, scholarly approach to death taken by those who study it as a phenomenon rather than worshipping it as divine. Sorcerers like those in Raya Lucaria view death as another aspect of reality to be understood, quantified, and manipulated through glintstone magic. The spells deal magic damage rather than holy damage, reinforcing that death in the lands between is treated as a natural force corrupted by Godwyn's incomplete demise rather than a sacred or divine principle. Fire's deathbed companions spread death through intimacy. Fire belongs to a mysterious tradition of deathbed companions who spread death through physical closeness and warmth. When fire embraces you at the Round Table Hold, she's not simply offering comfort, but transferring a portion of death's essence into your being. This manifests as the Baldachin's Blessing item, which reduces your maximum health until you consume it for a temporary poise boost. The lore describes how deathbed companions lay with champions and absorb their vigor, which they then transfer to the Prince of Death. Fia's ultimate goal is to lie with Godwyn's corpse to conceive a rune that will establish life within death as a principle of the New Order, essentially legitimizing the undead as part of the natural cycle. Tibia's summons calls Skeletal Boatman. Tibia's summons is a death sorcery that summons spectral skeletons wielding boat oars as weapons. These aren't random undead, but specifically invoke the imagery of Tibia mariners, the skeletal boat captains who shepherd the dead across waterways throughout the lands between. The spell's name references the tibia bone, and its animation shows skeletal hands bursting from the ground to attack enemies. What makes this particularly dark is the implication that death sorcerers can command not just any skeletons, but specifically those souls bound to shepherd others to their final rest, perverting the natural order of death rites. Rancor spells channel vengeful spirits. The Rancor family of death sorceries, including Rancor Call and Ancient Death Rancor, summon vengeful skulls that track enemies relentlessly. These aren't simple magical projectiles, but representations of angry, unquiet dead who pursue the living with furious determination. The skulls emit eerie, wailing sounds as they fly, creating an atmosphere of genuine supernatural dread. Lore suggests these spirits are drawn from those who live in death, souls trapped in the liminal space between life and true death, condemned to wander until the natural order is restored. Each skull represents an individual consciousness, twisted by incomplete death. Explosive Ghost Flame is a death sorcery that creates orbs of spectral fire. What makes this spell particularly disturbing is its description, which notes that Ghost Flame burns away even spirits who are supposed to be eternal. This means the spell doesn't just kill physical bodies, but destroys souls themselves, erasing beings from existence entirely. In a world where spirits are meant to return to the Erd-tree for rebirth, Explosive Ghost Flame represents the ultimate violation of this cycle, offering true oblivion rather than transformation. Fia's Mist brings Deathblight status. Fia's Mist is unique among death sorceries because it builds up the Deathblight status effect, rather than simply dealing damage. Deathblight is one of the most horrifying status effects in the game, causing instant death when the bar fills completely. The mist itself appears as a sickly grey fog that creeps along the ground, and enemies caught within it visibly decay, as root-like growths burst from their bodies. This mirrors exactly what happens when deathroot spreads through living flesh, suggesting that Fear's mist doesn't kill through conventional means, but rather forces premature death in life transformation. D. Hunter of the Dead wears armor specifically designed to resist death magic and death blight. His armor description mentions it being blessed to ward against those who live in death. When you wear his armor set, you gain increased resistance to death blight, reflecting his singular purpose of exterminating undead. The armor's twin nature, shared between D and his brother, represents the Golden Order's view that death should be orderly and complete, rather than the lingering half-existence that Godwyn's fate created. Interestingly, despite his devotion to hunting the undead, D himself can be killed by fear, showing that even Death's hunters aren't immune to it. Death Lightning corrupts holy power. Death Lightning is a unique incantation that represents corrupted ancient dragon magic, unlike the golden lightning of the dragon cult, or the red lightning used by the ancient dragons. Death Lightning crackles with a sickly green-black color, showing how death has tainted even the most sacred forms of power. The spell proves that Deathroot's corruption doesn't stop at organic matter, but can infect and twist pure energy itself. When Fortisax, the dragon who befriended Godwyn, tried to cleanse his friend's corruption in the deathbed dream, the death infected Fortisax's own lightning, transforming the noble lich dragon into a creature of death. Deathroot grows like living infection. Deathroot isn't simply a plant that happens to grow near death, but functions more like a living infection that spreads through root systems. When you collect Deathroot throughout the lands between and bring it to Gurunk, he consumes it desperately, trying to recombine the scattered fragments of the rune of death that was stolen from him when he was Malekith. Each piece of Deathroot represents death spreading beyond its proper boundaries, contaminating places it should never reach. The way Deathroot connects through underground root systems means nowhere with plant life is truly safe from death spread. Those who live in death violate Golden Order. Those who live in death represent the ultimate heresy against the Golden Order's principles. The Order was established by removing the rune of death from the Elden Ring, granting immortality to demigods and ordering death into a controlled process where souls return to the Erdtree for rebirth. Those who live in death exist outside this cycle entirely, neither properly dead nor truly alive. They've refused the call to return to the Erdtree, creating a third state that the Golden Order cannot tolerate. Fundamentalist hunters like D dedicate themselves to exterminating these beings not out of cruelty, but because their existence threatens reality's ordered structure. Deathrite birds guard spirit. Graves, deathbirds and deathrite birds are ancient constructs that predate the Erdtree's dominance, serving as guardians of places where spirits naturally gathered before the Golden Order's influence. These massive skeletal birds wield ghost flame and death magic, showing that death existed as a force long before Godwyn's fate corrupted it. Their armor descriptions mention they guard spirit graves, where all manners of death ultimately drift, suggesting there were once natural cycles of death that the Erdtree's order superseded. The fact that some death birds have been corrupted by Deathroot shows how even ancient death guardians aren't immune to the spread of Godwyn's unnatural state. Castle Soul in the mountaintops of the Giants contains evidence of attempts to use an eclipse to restore Godwyn's soul to his body. The castle's soldiers fought desperately to achieve this astronomical event, believing it would allow the first of the dead to regain his proper life. Even Miquella, Godwyn's half-brother, and perhaps the most powerful Empyrean, worked toward this goal, Yet all attempts failed, suggesting that the split nature of the curse mark of death created a wound in reality itself that cannot be healed by conventional means. The eclipse never came, and Godwyn remains trapped in his state of perpetual dying, his body eternally transforming without his soul to guide or end the process. Death Knights serve their undying lord. Death Knights are warriors who once served Godwyn in life and chose to continue serving him after his transformation into the Prince of Death. Rather than seeing his fate as a tragedy to be mourned, these knights embrace death as their new purpose, seeking cadaver surrogates and working toward an age of the Duskborn where those who live in death would be legitimized. Their golden armor shows signs of decay and corruption, with the golden wheel that once symbolized the Golden Order now appearing decayed, representing their unbroken loyalty to Godwyn, even as he became something antithetical to everything they once served. They represent the dark loyalty that persists beyond death itself. The three fingers oppose the two fingers. The three fingers represent the complete opposite of the two fingers who serve the greater will. Where the two fingers guide toward order and distinction, the three fingers offer chaos and the burning away of all that divides and distinguishes. This opposition isn't merely symbolic, but fundamental to the Lands Between's metaphysics. The two fingers and three fingers were once a complete hand of five fingers, representing the one great that existed before reality fractured. The three fingers seek to return everything to that primordial unity through burning away all separation, while the two fingers maintain the divisions that create individual existence. Shabriri was the first afflicted. Shabriri stands as the most reviled man in all recorded history of the Lands Between, and he's credited as the origin point of the frenzied flames spread among humans. After being punished for slander by having his eyes gouged out, the yellow flame of frenzy first appeared in his empty eye sockets, suggesting that extreme suffering and injustice can spontaneously generate the flame. Shabriri then spread madness deliberately, sharing the flame of despair with others and teaching that burning away the world would end all suffering. His name became synonymous with chaos, and even mentioning him is considered dangerous, as evidenced by the incantation named after him that builds madness in everyone nearby. The frenzied flame spreads through suffering. Unlike most magical forces in Elden Ring that require study, devotion, or innate talent, the frenzied flame spreads through intense suffering and despair. The nomadic merchants of the Great Caravan were accused of heresy, rounded up, and buried alive deep underground. In their anguish and despair, they chanted a curse that summoned the flame of frenzy, showing how collective suffering can birth this chaotic force. This means the frenzied flame isn't imposed from outside, but grows from within mortal hearts when they experience enough pain to wish for the world's complete dissolution. Every attempt to suppress it through punishment only creates more suffering, feeding the flame's spread. Madness only affects. Tarnished. Most frenzied flame incantations specify that their madness build-up only works on tarnished, not on regular enemies or creatures. This reveals something profound about the nature of madness in the Lands Between. Regular beings can burn from the flame's fire damage, but only those touched by grace, those chosen for a grand purpose, can experience the psychological breakdown that madness represents. This suggests that madness isn't simply insanity, but a specific corruption of the capacity for meaning and purpose that the tarnished possess. You can't drive something mad that never had reason to begin with. Vike nearly became Lord of Chaos, Round Table Knight, Vike came closer to becoming Elden Lord than any other tarnished before the player character. He collected multiple great runes, wielded powerful incantations, and stood at the threshold of claiming the title. However, when he learned that his finger maiden would have to burn as kindling at the Forge of the Giants, he refused to sacrifice her. Instead, Vike traveled deep beneath Leyndell and allowed the three fingers to embrace him, accepting the frenzied flame in hopes of becoming Lord of Chaos instead, believing this would spare his maiden. The flame burned through his armor, leaving permanent fingerprint scars, and drove him to madness. He now invades players as a mad phantom, forever trapped between his noble intentions and the chaos that consumed him. Inescapable Frenzy grabs your soul. Inescapable Frenzy is perhaps the most disturbing frenzied flame incantation, because it requires you to physically grab an opponent and channel madness directly into their mind. The animation shows the caster clutching the victim's head while yellow flames burst from their eyes at point-blank range. The name Inescapable isn't metaphorical. Once the grab connects, the victim cannot break free until the full fury of the three fingers' touch has been delivered. This spell represents the most intimate form of spreading madness, requiring direct physical contact to force another being to experience the same despair that birthed the flame. Frenzied Burst pierces. Through everything, Frenzied Burst fires a concentrated beam of yellow flame from the caster's eyes with incredible range and penetrating power. When fully charged, this incantation can punch through shields, terrain, and even some walls, making it one of the few attacks in the game that treats obstacles as mere suggestions. The lore notes that every person who attempted to control the frenzied flame for their own purposes succumbed to madness after desperate internal struggle, suggesting that Frenzied Burst represents what happens when someone tries to focus and weaponize chaos itself. The beam's yellow color matches the distinctive hue of frenzy, and its penetrating nature symbolizes how madness seeps through any defense. The flame melts, even spirits. One of the most horrifying aspects of the frenzied flame is its ability to destroy spirits, which are supposed to be eternal. The description for spirit gravestones burned by frenzied flame explicitly states that spirits are eternal, and yet frenzied flame melts them away regardless. This means the flame doesn't just kill or drive mad, but fundamentally erases existence itself. It burns away the distinction between life and death, soul and body, being and nothingness, until nothing remains. This is why the Hornson forbid its use, and why the frenzied flame ending shows your character's head transforming into a burning void that consumes everything. Yellow madness grapes are eyeballs. Some followers of the frenzied flame remove their own eyes as offerings, calling these harvested eyeballs grapes in a disturbing euphemism. These frenzy flaming eyes are described as marked with fingerprint burns, proof of having been touched directly by the three fingers. Consuming these eyeballs apparently brings one closer to the frenzied flame, allowing people to see it as a distant light, even after blinding themselves. This practice inverts normal sight, suggesting that physical vision prevents perceiving the truth of chaos, and only by destroying your ability to see the material world can you glimpse the flame's deeper reality. It's a grotesque literalization of willful blindness. Fingerprint shield bears. Chaos's seed. The fingerprint stone shield is described as part of an ancient god's tomb, carved with intricate fingerprint patterns. These imprints were created by the readerless fingers, entities that relayed their message through these marks, which are said to be the very seeds from which frenzy first sprouted. This suggests the frenzied flame has existed since before recorded history, predating even the Erd tree, and possibly the greater will itself. The shield weighs an enormous amount and requires significant strength to wield, as if the weight of chaos itself makes it nearly unbearable. Carrying it means bearing the physical manifestation of the force that seeks to melt away all distinction. Howl of Shabriri forces. Attention. Howl of Shabriri releases a maddening shriek that builds madness in all nearby foes, while simultaneously making them more likely to target the caster. This incantation embodies how madness spreads through social connection. By forcing enemies to focus on you, you become the vector through which frenzy propagates. The spell also builds madness in the caster significantly, creating a feedback loop where spreading chaos requires accepting more chaos yourself. This represents how revolutionary movements based on destruction eventually consume their own adherents, as the call to burn everything down doesn't exempt those doing the burning. Merchants fear the flame. They summoned. The nomadic merchants scattered across the lands between are survivors of the great caravan that summoned the frenzied flame in their despair. However, rather than embracing the flame fully, most merchants seem to have achieved an uneasy détente with it. They live with low-level madness, but maintain enough sanity to conduct business and travel. Their yellow eyes reveal their affliction, yet they retain enough humanity to help tarnished with trades. Only when attacked or dying do they utter the mantras of chaos followers, suggesting their curse emerges under stress. This shows that frenzy exists on a spectrum, from mild affliction to complete consumption. The flame destroys individuality. The ultimate goal of the frenzied flame isn't simply destruction, but the melting away of all that divides and distinguishes, returning everything to the one great. This means the flame seeks to destroy individuality itself, erasing the boundaries between self and other, burning away personal identity until only undifferentiated existence remains. When you become the Lord of Frenzied Flame, your character's head is replaced by a burning void with yellow flames, symbolizing how your individual identity has been consumed. The ending shows this chaos spreading across the entire world, melting away all distinctions until nothing remains but primordial unity. Midra almost became chaos. Lord, in the shadow of the Erd Tree expansion, Midra attempted to control the frenzied flame through study, rather than succumbing to despair. His entire manse in the Shadow Realm became a research facility dedicated to understanding frenzy's nature. The Hornsent tortured him endlessly to prevent him from ascending as Lord of Chaos, impaling him with countless spikes that should have killed him, but instead trapped him in perpetual agony. When you remove the great spike from his head during the boss fight, all that accumulated suffering erupts at once, and Midra briefly transforms into the Lord of Frenzied Flame he tried so hard to avoid becoming. His failure proves that nobody, no matter how scholarly or prepared, can truly control chaos. Frenzied Flame Seal channels multiple stats. The Frenzied Flame Seal is unique because it scales incantations with strength, dexterity, intelligence, and faith simultaneously, rather than specializing in any one stat. This unusual scaling represents how chaos accepts all forms of power equally, melting them together without distinction. The seal appears formless and bestial, marked with fingerprint burns from the three fingers' embrace. Wielding it means channeling the force that seeks to blend everything into one, and its multi-stat scaling mechanically represents this philosophy. Interestingly, despite scaling with intelligence, it's still classified as a sacred seal rather than a staff, showing how frenzy corrupts even the distinction between sorcery and incantation. The primeval current drove Azur mad. Master Azur, one of the two founding primeval sorcerers and a former Grand Master of Raya Lucaria, glimpsed into the primeval current and saw darkness that left him both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. This cosmic revelation changed him fundamentally, and he was eventually driven from the academy for his dangerous obsessions. When you find Azur, he sits motionless near the cliffs of Mount Gelmir, having transformed almost entirely into blue-green glintstone. His crown, which once held his brain and skull, is now all but dead, existing only as a conduit for his most powerful spell. Azur's fate shows that peering too deeply into the primeval current doesn't bring enlightenment, but existential horror that slowly crystallizes your humanity into magical stone. Lusat witnessed a star cluster die. Master Lusat, Azur's counterpart in primeval sorcery research, gazed into the primeval current and beheld the final moments of a great star cluster collapsing. Upon witnessing this cosmic death, he too was broken, his mind unable to cope with the scale and finality of stellar extinction. Like Azur, Lusat's body began transforming into glintstone, though his corruption manifests as deep blue crystallization. You find him sealed in Celia Hideaway, barely conscious and unable to communicate, his form halfway between human and mineral. The experience of watching stars die impressed upon him the ultimate futility of mortal existence, as even the cosmos itself faces inevitable heat death. Primeval sorceries channel raw cosmos. The primeval current represents the raw, unfiltered power of the cosmos before being refined into controllable glintstone sorcery. Regular glintstone spells are humanity's attempt to bottle and domesticate cosmic forces, making them safe and reliable. Primeval sorceries skip this refinement process, channeling the universe's power in its most primal and dangerous form. This is why spells like Comet Azur and Stars of Ruin consume massive amounts of FP and require tremendous intelligence to cast. You're not simply casting a spell, but temporarily becoming a conduit for stellar fury itself. The primeval current doesn't care about the caster's survival and will burn out a weak mind that dares channel it. The Academy banned primeval studies after witnessing what happened to Azur and Lusat. Raya Lucaria officially banned the study of the primeval current. The Karian royal family, who gained control of the Academy after marrying into its leadership, specifically suppressed these teachings because they recognized how dangerous such knowledge could be. This isn't arbitrary censorship, but pragmatic survival. Every sorcerer who successfully glimpsed the primeval current lost their sanity and humanity. The ban represents the Academy choosing controlled progress over potentially revolutionary but catastrophic breakthroughs. Despite this prohibition, some sorcerers like Selen continued primeval research in secret, unable to resist the lure of ultimate cosmic understanding. Selen's research created graven masses. Sorceress Selen earned the title Graven Witch by conducting experiments so heinous that even the Academy that permitted most magical research had to exile her. She transformed fellow sorcerers into graven masses, which are described as the seeds of stars. These horrific spheres consist of multiple sorcerers' bodies and minds fused together through painful magical processes, their faces visible as agonized masks across the sphere's surface. Selen believed this transformation was necessary to pierce the secrets of the primeval current, treating her colleagues as expendable experimental materials. The fact that she views this as another path of scientific inquiry reveals how the pursuit of primeval knowledge erodes basic ethical boundaries. Azur's crown consumes your FP. When you wear Azur's glintstone crown after completing Selen's questline, it boosts the power of primeval current sorceries by 15%, but increases the FP cost of all sorceries by the same amount. This mechanical trade-off reflects the philosophical cost of primeval knowledge. Greater power requires greater sacrifice. The crown description notes that it replaced Azur's brain and skull altogether, meaning his humanity was literally traded away for magical might. Wearing it means accepting a portion of this transformation, allowing the crystallized remnant of his consciousness to enhance your spells while draining your resources faster. You're borrowing power from something that was once human, but chose to become something else. Lusat's crown does the same. Lusat's glintstone crown functions identically to Azur's, specifically boosting Stars of Ruin while increasing all spell costs. The parallel fates of these two Grandmasters emphasizes that primeval research always extracts the same price, regardless of the specific revelations encountered. Both sorcerers reached beyond what humanity was meant to know. Both paid with their minds and bodies, and both left behind crystalline artifacts that allow others to taste their power without fully understanding the cost. The crowns serve as warnings that power and knowledge have limits for good reasons, yet their very existence tempts new generations to repeat the same mistakes. Founding Reign of Stars was the first sorcery. Founding Reign of Stars is described as the eldest primeval sorcery, said to have been discovered by an ancient astrologer who first glimpsed the primeval current. This spell summons a dark cloud overhead that releases a violent deluge of star rain, and it represents humanity's first successful attempt to channel cosmic power. The description notes that the glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the star's amber rained down on the lands between, introducing glintstone and glintstone sorcery to the world. This means all magic in the game traces back to one person's vision of the cosmos, making every spell cast a distant echo of that original revelation. The primeval current predates the Erd Tree. The primeval current existed long before the Greater Will sent the Elden beast to the lands between and established the Golden Order. Ancient astrologers studying the night sky discovered it during the age when fire giants ruled, suggesting that cosmic forces operated independently of the gods who would later claim divine authority. The star's amber that rained down introduced glintstone without any divine intervention, showing that magic itself isn't inherently tied to faith or worship, but rather represents humanity's connection to the wider universe. This undermines the Golden Order's claims to absolute authority, revealing that powerful forces existed before its dominion and will persist after. Crystallians guard primeval secrets. Crystallians are inorganic beings of living crystal that possess what sorcerers call the wisdom of stone, a faint cognition that represents a basic understanding of the primeval current. These creatures serve as living embodiments of what happens when matter becomes infused with cosmic understanding. They're essentially what sorcerers like Azur and Lusat are slowly transforming into. The crystal staff, which Crystallians drop, can only be wielded by those with intelligence high enough to grasp the wisdom of stone. Those who successfully peer beyond this wisdom gain access to primeval sorceries, but they also begin the irreversible process of themselves becoming living glintstone. Comet Azur requires perfect focus. Comet Azur's continuous beam effect makes it vulnerable to interruption. Any damage taken while channeling will break the spell and waste your FP. This fragility reflects how primeval sorceries demand absolute commitment and perfection from their casters. There's no room for error when channeling stellar forces directly through your body. The spell's most famous application involves combining it with the Cerulean Hidden Tear to enable 10 seconds of infinite FP, allowing the caster to unleash the full sustained blast. This setup represents the perfect conditions required for primeval magic. Remove any constraints, accept all risks, and channel maximum power for a brief window before mortal limitations reassert themselves. Stars of Ruin pierces all defenses. Stars of Ruin fires 12 dark shooting stars that pursue targets with relentless tracking, bending through the air in ways that defy normal projectile physics. What makes this spell particularly dangerous is that the projectiles can curve around obstacles, making traditional cover useless. This represents how cosmic forces don't respect mortal concepts like walls or shields. The stars will find you regardless. The spell's high intelligence requirement of 60 and 3 memory slot cost market as peak primeval sorcery, accessible only to those who've fully committed to understanding the cosmos. Its dark coloring, distinct from normal blue glintstone, emphasizes its connection to the abyss azure glimpsed rather than humanity's refined magical traditions. Carian sorcerers also studied the current. Although the Carians officially banned primeval research after gaining control of the Academy, they themselves weren't immune to its lure. Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, uses primeval sorceries during her boss fight, despite the prohibition she helped enforce. This hypocrisy reveals that even those wise enough to recognize the danger couldn't completely resist studying the primeval current. The Carian regal scepter is described as the finest of all glintstone staves, and only those with the highest intelligence may wield it, suggesting that Renala's power comes partly from primeval understanding she chose to keep for herself, while denying it to others. Knowledge is easier to ban than to forget. Primeval sorcerers lose their humanity. Slowly, the transformation of Azure and Lusa into glintstone wasn't instantaneous, but gradual, happening over years or decades as their bodies crystallized piece by piece. Their robes, corroded by blue and green glintstones, show this process spreading from within outward. First their minds broke under cosmic revelation, then their flesh began changing, and finally their skulls and brains were replaced entirely by magical crystal. This slow metamorphosis represents how obsession with the primeval current erodes humanity incrementally. Each revelation brings you closer to understanding the universe, while taking you further from what you were. By the time you realize you're changing, you're already too transformed to turn back. The abyss stares back at primeval sorcerers. Azure saw darkness when he gazed into the primeval current, an abyss that bewitched and frightened him simultaneously. This cosmic void isn't empty nothingness, but rather the space between stars, the vast dark that contains and connects all stellar objects. To glimpse it is to understand the universe's true scale and your own infinitesimal insignificance within it. That realization breaks something fundamental in the human psyche, the comfortable illusion that you matter on a cosmic scale. The abyss doesn't need to act against you. Simply perceiving it truthfully is enough to shatter mortal minds. This is why the primeval current is humanity's most dangerous discovery. Not because the universe is hostile, but because comprehending it accurately destroys the necessary lies that allow human consciousness to function. Dragon communion is seen as heresy. Dragon Communion represents one of the most controversial magical practices in the lands between. Unlike the dragon cult, which worships ancient dragons and receives their blessings through faith, Dragon Communion practitioners consume dragon hearts to steal their power through sacrifice and consumption. This practice horrifies many because it's not simply hunting dragons, but ritualistically devouring their essence in sacred spaces. The term incantation hardly applies according to the Dragon Communion seal's description. The practice is too primal for such civilized terminology. The two Dragon Communion altars, one in Limgrave and another in Caelid, exist in remote locations, suggesting this tradition operates outside mainstream religious and magical institutions. Consuming dragon hearts changes your body. The Dragon Communion seal's description warns that the sacrificial devouring of the heart gives power, but it doesn't mention the physical cost. Repeated Dragon Communion slowly transforms practitioners' bodies in disturbing ways. Their scales might change color or texture. Their eyes might develop draconic pupils, and their voice might take on inhuman resonances when casting breath incantations. The game doesn't show these transformations overtly on player characters, but NPC dialogue and item descriptions hint at magma worms being the ultimate fate of those who overindulge in Dragon Communion. These massive, pathetic creatures were once humans who consumed so many dragon hearts that they transformed completely, losing their humanity forever while gaining only a fraction of true draconic power. Magma worms are failed Dragon Communion. Adepts, magma worms represent the dark endpoint of Dragon Communion taken too far. These massive slug-like creatures with vestigial limbs and iron weapons clutched in deformed hands are described as humans who overindulged in Dragon Communion and paid the price. Their transformation left them trapped between human and dragon, gaining neither the grace of their former humanity nor the majesty of true dragonhood. Instead, they became something pitiable and monstrous, condemned to crawl through volcanic regions while wielding weapons they can barely hold. When you defeat them and take their dragon hearts, you're repeating the cycle that created them, consuming power that promises strength, but threatens transformation into something unrecognizable. The practice predates the Erdtree. Dragon Communion existed long before the Erdtree rose and the Golden Order was established. Ancient humans developed this ritual during the age when dragons ruled the lands between, when the only way to challenge draconic supremacy was through dangerous power theft. The Church and Cathedral of Dragon Communion both feature architecture inconsistent with Golden Order aesthetics, suggesting they're remnants of pre-Erdtree civilization. This makes Dragon Communion one of humanity's oldest magical traditions, born from desperation and predatory mimicry, rather than divine blessing or scholarly study. It's magic as cannibalism, power as consumption, knowledge gained by eating the teacher. Breath attacks consume your stamina heavily, Dragon Communion. Breath attacks drain stamina enormously compared to most spells, reflecting the physical toll of channeling draconic power through a human body not designed for it. When you cast Dragonfire or Rotten Breath, your character's entire body glows with internal energy trying to escape, and the strain is visible in how they brace themselves during the exhalation. This isn't simply magical energy expenditure, but a fundamental incompatibility between mortal flesh and draconic essence. Your lungs weren't meant to produce these elements. Your throat wasn't designed to channel superheated gases or scarlet rot. Yet Dragon Communion forces your body to do so anyway, creating immediate physical consequences that manifest as stamina depletion. Dragon Maw is physical dragon violence. Unlike breath attacks that launch elemental projectiles, Dragon Maw summons a dragon's head directly above you that bites enemies with physical jaws and teeth. This spell represents the most visceral form of dragon communion, not channeling draconic power through magic, but literally manifesting a portion of dragon anatomy to attack directly. The phantom dragon head appears with startling solidity, its jaws snapping with palpable force that deals physical rather than elemental damage. This distinction matters because it shows dragon communion encompasses more than stolen elemental abilities. It includes appropriating the dragon's physical predatory nature itself, their capacity for sudden violent ambush and crushing bite force. Grail's Roar debuffs everything nearby. Grail's Roar, obtained from the massive ancient dragon Grail in Caelid, releases a thunderous dragon roar that significantly reduces enemies' attack power and defense. What's disturbing about this incantation is that it represents stealing the authority of dragon elders. Grail isn't just any dragon, but appears to be an ancient matriarch surrounded by lesser dragons who protect her. Her roar once commanded respect and fear across the lands between, and now you can use that same commanding presence for yourself. The spell doesn't deal damage, but instead imposes the weight of draconic dominance on everything nearby, forcing even mighty foes to cower before authority they instinctively recognize. Rot Breath spreads Millennia's curse. Rotten Breath and Exixe's decay allow you to spread the Scarlet Rot affliction that devastated Caelid and nearly killed Radahn. The fact that this plague exists in dragon form suggests a connection between dragons and the outer god of rot that claimed Millennia. Decaying Exix, the dragon that grants the stronger version, is slowly dying from rot even as it spreads the affliction through its breath. By consuming its heart and learning this power, you're not just acquiring a useful status effect, but continuing the spread of one of the lands between's most devastating curses, becoming a vector for the same plague that transformed Caelid into a hellish wasteland. Glintstone Breath proves dragon magic connection. Smaragd's Glintstone Breath and Ardula's Moonblade show that some dragons developed magical abilities distinct from traditional breath weapons, suggesting their connection to the primeval current and cosmos. Smaragd in particular appears as a crystallized dragon whose breath produces glintstone projectiles rather than fire or lightning. This indicates dragons evolved alongside or parallel to human magical traditions, independently discovering ways to channel cosmic power. The existence of glintstone-breathing dragons raises questions about whether glintstone sorcery is truly human innovation or something humanity learned by observing draconic magic, making dragon communion potentially a return to magic's original source. Dragonclaw grants primal physicality. Dragonclaw channels draconic physical power directly into your body, causing your strikes to tear the ground with energy waves. Unlike breath attacks that project power outward or bite attacks that summon phantom dragon parts, Dragonclaw integrates draconic might into your own limbs temporarily. This represents the most intimate form of transformation, where the boundary between human caster and dragon essence dissolves during the attack. Your hands become dragon claws in function, if not appearance, capable of rending foes with supernatural strength. This temporary fusion hints at what permanent transformation might feel like, offering a taste of draconic power while maintaining enough humanity to return to your normal form afterward. Bale's incantations channel ancient dragon war. The shadow of the Erdtree expansion introduces Bale's flame lightning and Bale's tyranny, incantations derived from the dread dragon Bale, who warred against Placidusax himself. These spells contain echoes of that primordial conflict, channeling not just draconic power, but specifically the fury and defiance of a dragon who dared challenge the Dragon Lord. Baal's tyranny in particular involves channeling the ancient dragon's rebellious essence, briefly transforming your attacks with the same devastating force that tore through Placidusax's multiple heads. This reveals that Dragon Communion preserves not just physical power, but the memories and grudges of consumed dragons, making each incantation a fragment of draconic history made manifest. The Seal scales with Arcane. The Dragon Communion. Seal scales with both faith and arcane rather than faith alone, reflecting how this practice combines religious ritual with mysterious transformative forces. Arcane represents hidden knowledge, blood magic, and transformation, perfectly capturing Dragon Communion's nature as a dangerous practice that changes practitioners on fundamental levels. This dual scaling means Dragon Communion builds benefit from investing in two stats that represent opposing approaches: faith for channeling granted power through devotion, and arcane for understanding hidden truths and undergoing metamorphosis. The combination creates a precarious balance where you're simultaneously priest and experiment, worshipper and consumer. Hearts retain Dragon Consciousness. When you consume a dragon heart at communion altars, you're not absorbing neutral energy, but the actual consciousness and essence of a once-living dragon. This is why each named dragon grants specific incantations related to their particular abilities. You're not learning generic dragon magic, but integrating that individual dragon's knowledge and power into yourself. The dragon doesn't truly die when its body falls. A portion of its awareness persists in the heart, waiting to be either consumed through communion or claimed by the dragon god Placidusax if left undisturbed. By eating these hearts, you're conducting a form of soul cannibalism, making dragon consciousness part of your own being. The transformation is permanent. Unlike most buffs or temporary effects in Elden Ring, the changes wrought by Dragon Communion are permanent. Once you consume a dragon heart and learn an incantation, that power remains with you forever, suggesting the transformation to your body and soul cannot be reversed. This is why excessive communion leads to becoming a magma worm. Each heart consumed pushes you slightly further from humanity with no way back. The game mechanically allows unlimited learning of dragon incantations, but lore suggests that somewhere beyond what players experience, a threshold exists. Once crossed, you lose yourself entirely to draconic transformation, joining the pitiful worms who traded everything for power they can barely control. Graven School Talismans contain sorcerer corpses. The Graven School Talisman and Graven Mass Talisman aren't simple magical accessories, but actual spheres containing the compressed bodies and minds of multiple sorcerers. These grotesque objects significantly boost the power of all sorceries, with the Graven Mass version providing an even larger bonus because it contains more victims. The item descriptions note, these are seeds of stars that sorcerers crafted by bonding together, suggesting this wasn't always forced upon unwilling subjects, but sometimes represented a grotesque form of collaborative magic. Either way, wearing these talismans means carrying condensed human suffering that boosts your spells specifically, because it contains the concentrated magical potential of multiple merged casters. Azur's Graven Mass hangs in the Academy, inside the Church of the Cuckoo at Raya Lucaria. A massive Graven Mass hangs from the ceiling, far larger than the talisman versions. This horrible sphere displays the faces and bodies of numerous sorcerers fused into one agonized whole, their individual features still visible as raised bumps across its surface. The fact that it's displayed openly in the academy suggests that at some point, this practice was not only tolerated, but possibly celebrated as an achievement in magical fusion. The mass might represent an early experiment in primeval current research, an attempt to combine multiple minds to handle cosmic revelations too intense for individual sorcerers. Its current state, apparently inert and dead, suggests the experiment ultimately failed. Selen transforms into a graven mass. If you complete Selen's questline by helping her overthrow Renala at the academy, you'll return to find she's undergone the same transformation she inflicted on others. Depending on interpretation, this is either karmic justice for her crimes or the natural endpoint of her primeval research. Selen believed that transforming sorcerers into graven masses would allow them to pierce the secrets of the primeval current through Gestalt consciousness, and now she's become the proof of her own theories. Her transformation suggests that pursuing primeval knowledge inevitably leads to losing your individual identity, whether through gradual crystallization like Azur and Lusat, or sudden violent fusion like graven mass creation. The Academy performs living experiments. Throughout Raya Lucaria, you find evidence of ongoing magical experiments on living subjects. The debate parlor contains reanimated carcasses stitched together with wheels, arms grafted onto bodies in impossible configurations, and sorcerers who've transformed into bloated creatures bursting with glintstone. The Academy's pursuit of magical knowledge clearly treats ethics as optional, viewing sentient beings as raw materials for experimentation. These aren't ancient mistakes, but current practices, as evidenced by living scholars who attack you alongside their monstrous creations. The Golden Order may have issues, but the Academy's unchecked research suggests that magical academia without moral constraints produces horrors just as terrible as religious extremism. Sorcerer hunters target Academy graduates. The commoners of Raya Lucaria aren't academics, but laborers and guards who've developed a deep hatred for the sorcerers they serve. When you fight the pumpkin-headed laborers throughout the Academy grounds, their aggression stems from resentment of the wizards who treat them as expendable. Some descriptions mention that these workers sometimes attacked the very sorcerers who employed them, and that the Academy had to arm them with inferior weapons to prevent uprisings. This creates a picture of the Academy as a place maintained by oppressed underclass who hate their magical overlords, but lack the power to resist effectively, making Raya Lucaria as much a prison maintained through force as a place of learning. Crystal tears are compressed. Sorcerers. The crystal tears found throughout Liurnia of the lakes and other regions containing Erdtree avatars aren't natural formations, but appear to be related to the glintstone transformation affecting sorcerers. Some item descriptions hint these tears represent the final stage of crystallization, where a sorcerer's entire being compresses into a small, perfect gem. If true, every crystal tear you collect and use in your wondrous physic represents consuming someone's crystallized essence for temporary power boost. This would make Flask of Wondrous Physic another form of magical cannibalism disguised as helpful item, where you literally drink liquefied sorcerer to enhance yourself. Academy seals its own students inside. The various sealed doors and magical barriers throughout Raya Lucaria suggest the Academy routinely locks its own students and faculty into chambers, sometimes permanently. The barrier protecting Lusat required a special key that only Selen possessed, implying he was imprisoned rather than simply isolated by choice. Other sealed areas contain hostile sorcerers who attack on sight, suggesting they've been trapped so long they've lost sanity. The Academy appears to use isolation and imprisonment as both punishment and experimental condition, studying how confinement affects magical development, or simply ensuring dangerous research doesn't escape to threaten the wider world. Glintstone crowns damage your mind. The various glintstone crowns found throughout the Academy all provide stat bonuses to intelligence or other attributes while imposing penalties elsewhere. But their descriptions reveal something darker. These crowns actively reshape your brain. Azur and Lusat's crowns literally replace their skulls, while other crowns, like the Carolo's crown or Witch's crown, are described as subtly altering thought patterns. Wearing these items means accepting hardware that interfaces directly with your brain, trading mental integrity for enhanced magical capacity. The longer you wear them, the more your thoughts align with whatever philosophy or specialization the crown was designed to enhance. Carrion Knight sorcerers betray their oath. The Carrion Knights were supposed to serve the royal family with absolute loyalty, yet many of them abandoned their posts or turned against House Carrion once Renala's mental breakdown became apparent. The skeletal sorcerer knights found throughout Leonia seem to have died in conflicts with each other rather than external enemies, suggesting civil war among the Academy's defenders. This reveals that even organizations bound by oaths and honor dissolve when leadership fails, and that magic users prioritize their research interests over loyalty when convenient. The scattered Carrion Knight corpses tell stories of former allies fighting over resources, knowledge, or simple survival after institutional collapse. Hidden libraries contain banned knowledge. Throughout the Academy and surrounding regions, hidden libraries contain scrolls and books that grant access to spells the Academy officially banned. The Royal House Scroll and Academy Scroll exist separate from the formal curriculum, suggesting a shadow network of forbidden knowledge that ambitious sorcerers trade in secret. These banned spells aren't inherently more powerful than approved magic, so their prohibition must stem from other concerns. Perhaps they require unethical components, produce unacceptable side effects, or simply threaten the Academy's control over magical education. The existence of these clandestine documents proves that banning knowledge never truly eliminates it, just drives it underground, where it becomes more dangerous without oversight. Sorcerers experiment on each other. Item descriptions and environmental storytelling reveal that Academy sorcerers frequently experimented on colleagues, sometimes with consent, but often without. The various transformed beings throughout Raya Lucaria, from the crawling scholars to the grafted monstrosities, represent successful experiments that survived transformation, even if they lost humanity in the process. Failed experiments likely died and were discarded, their bodies contributing to the corpse-littered environment. This casual cruelty toward each other reveals how the pursuit of magical knowledge erodes normal social bonds and ethical behavior, turning colleagues into potential experimental subjects and research into a form of predation. The Academy's library holds cosmic secrets. The Grand Library at Raya Lucaria's summit contains not just ordinary books, but texts written during the Academy's golden age, when it actively studied the primeval current and cosmic forces. Renala sits eternally in this chamber, clutching her amber egg and occasionally casting full moon sorcery during her boss fight, suggesting she's guarding or communing with knowledge too dangerous for general access. The library's contents probably include the original research notes of Azur and Lusat, documentation of primeval current observations, and theoretical frameworks for understanding stellar forces. This accumulated knowledge represents humanity's most dangerous achievement, a comprehensive guide to forces that break minds attempting to comprehend them. Glintstone keys lock away dangerous magic. The various glintstone keys found throughout the game don't simply unlock doors, but specifically seal away magical knowledge or experiments too dangerous for unrestricted access. The keys themselves hum with power, suggesting they're not just keys, but magical containment systems that actively suppress whatever they seal. Finding and using these keys means you're deliberately releasing knowledge or forces that someone judged too threatening for general access. Sometimes, what you find is merely helpful spells, but other times, you unseal nightmare creatures or corrupted sorcerers. The keys represent the Academy's awareness of its own danger, its grudging acknowledgement that some research must be locked away even from those conducting it. Sorcery scrolls are incomplete. Deliberately, many sorcery scrolls you find contain only partial spell lists or fragmentary knowledge, and item descriptions sometimes mention missing pages or incomplete instructions. This incompleteness appears intentional rather than accidental, suggesting sorcerers deliberately recorded their knowledge in scattered pieces to prevent any single person from accessing complete magical systems. This fragmentation protects powerful magic from casual theft, while ensuring knowledge survives even if individual practitioners die. However, it also means reconstructing complete magical traditions requires finding multiple scrolls, and you're never quite certain you have the full picture. The missing pieces might contain crucial warnings or context that prevent a misuse of the partial magic you've learned. Blood loss literally drains life force. The blood loss status effect doesn't just represent physical bleeding, but the literal extraction of vital essence from living targets. When the invisible blood meter fills completely, targets lose a massive percentage of their current health instantly, representing life force being forcibly torn from their body. This makes blood magic fundamentally different from weapons that merely cut. Blood sorceries and blood-infused weapons actively hunger for life energy and feed on it when possible. The Formless Mother, the outer god associated with blood, appears to grant power specifically through this process of draining others' vitality, creating a predatory cycle where blood practitioners must continuously harm others to maintain their strength. Swarm of Flies represents albinoric blood magic. Swarm of Flies is technically a blood sorcery obtained in Mogwin Palace, the realm of blood where Mog rules. The spell summons a swarm that builds blood loss rapidly, but its animation shows reddish flies that seem to carry blood on their bodies, or even consist of blood themselves. The connection to Mogwin Palace and its albinoric victims suggests these flies might be drawn from or feed upon the blood of Mog's countless sacrifices. The underground palace contains rivers of blood and countless crucified albinorics being drained, so the flies could represent a lesser manifestation of the same blood magic that sustains Mog's entire realm, feeding on suffering and extracting life force with insect efficiency. Briars of Sin grow from guilt. Briars of Sin and Briars of Punishment are aberrant sorceries that conjure blood-red thorns, which erupt from the caster's body to damage nearby enemies. These thorns represent sin made manifest, growing directly from guilt and wrongdoing until they burst through flesh as literal stigmata. The fact that these thorns damage enemies by emerging from your own body suggests the magic transforms your sins into weapons, making your moral failings into tactical advantages. This creates a disturbing incentive structure where committing sins might actually enhance these spells' effectiveness. encouraging moral degradation as a power source. The briar's blood-red color connects them to blood magic traditions, suggesting guilt and bloodshed are spiritually linked forces. Mad Tongue, Alberich. Transformed victims. Mad Tongue Alberich, the invader in Lendel's underground area, practiced a particularly disturbing form of blood magic. Item descriptions note that he and the guilty transformed blood sacrifices into red glintstone through their rituals. This reveals that blood magic isn't limited to status effects and life drain, but can fundamentally alter matter itself, crystallizing human victims into magical gemstones. These red glintstones presumably retain some power or utility. Otherwise, the transformation wouldn't be worth performing. Alberich's madness and his underground location suggest this practice was known even to other criminals and outcasts, practiced in secret despite violating every moral and magical boundary. Blood sorceries scale with arcane. Blood sorceries scale primarily with arcane rather than intelligence, separating them from mainstream glintstone traditions. This unusual scaling reflects how blood magic operates through mysteries and hidden forces, rather than understood principles. Arcane represents occult knowledge, transformation, and status effects, perfectly capturing blood magic's nature as power gained through ritual sacrifice and mysterious outer god patronage rather than academic study. This means blood mage builds work fundamentally differently from glintstone sorcerers, despite both using staves as catalysts, creating strange hybrids that combine magical casting animation with melee-focused builds that need high arcane for weapon bleed effects. Rivers of blood flow through Mogwin. The Mogwin Palace underground area features literal rivers of blood flowing through its chambers and corridors, suggesting Morg has been collecting blood offerings on a massive scale for centuries. The blood doesn't decay or coagulate, but remains fluid and fresh, sustained by the power of the formless mother. Swimming in these crimson rivers deals no damage to you, suggesting the blood has been sanctified or transformed into something beyond mere bodily fluid. This environmental detail reveals blood magic operating at a scale beyond individual spells or effects, showing how an outer god's influence can fundamentally reshape entire regions to reflect its nature. Bloody Slash drains caster's health. Bloody Slash Ash of War requires you to slice your own wrist or palm to empower the weapon with blood, visibly damaging yourself in the animation. This self-harm mechanic represents blood magic's fundamental principle. Power requires sacrifice, and sometimes that sacrifice must come from the caster. The spell creates a ranged slash of blood that deals damage and builds blood loss on enemies, but it always costs you health first. This creates interesting risk-reward decisions, where you must decide if draining your own life to inflict blood loss on enemies provides enough tactical advantage to justify the health expenditure. Eleonora's Poleblade dances in blood. Eleonora's Poleblade is a unique twin blade wielded by the NPC invader, Eleonora, Violet Bloody Finger. Its special skill creates a dancing combo attack that builds blood loss rapidly while also healing the user based on damage dealt. This represents blood magic's vampiric potential, where life force drained from enemies can be absorbed to heal your own wounds. Eleonora herself appears to be sustained entirely by this blood magic, her repeated invasions suggesting she hunts for blood to fuel her continued existence. Her purple color scheme and flower imagery connect her to some aspect of blood magic beyond Mog's teachings, hinting at other blood traditions that predate or exist parallel to his dynasty. Blood incantations summon Formless Mother. The blood incantations like Blood Flame Blade and Blood Boon invoke the Formless Mother, an outer god whose nature remains largely mysterious. Unlike other outer gods with clear agendas like the frenzied flames chaos or rot god's decay, the formless mother seems focused specifically on blood and sacrifice without obvious cosmic goals. Her formlessness suggests she exists as pure visceral force rather than conscious entity, more primal drive than thinking deity. This makes blood magic feel older and more fundamental than other schools, touching something that existed before gods developed personalities and purposes, when divine power was still raw and undirected. Blood oath gesture signals loyalty. The blood oath gesture involves cutting your palm to let blood flow as a sign of absolute commitment to another player. This simple emote reveals how deeply blood magic has penetrated the lands between culture, where blood sacrifice has become a recognized social ritual. The gesture originated with Mog's dynasty, but spread beyond it, suggesting his influence reaches further than his physical realm. Making a blood oath in-game has no mechanical effect, but its existence in the gesture menu shows that even outside gameplay mechanics, blood rituals hold cultural weight in this world. It's become a language of its own, spoken through scarification and offering. Bloodstar spell tracks. Through geometry, Bloodstar and Blood Boon both fire projectiles that track enemies with unusual persistence, curving around obstacles and finding targets through complex environments. This tracking represents how blood magic conceptually works. It follows life force rather than direct line of sight, seeking the living pulse wherever it tries to hide. The spell's physical projectiles are red, comet-like forms that leave trailing blood droplets as they fly, visually distinct from normal sorceries. Their tracking also suggests the outer god's awareness, as if the formless mother herself guides each projectile toward flesh and blood, making these less spells and more extensions of divine predatory instinct. Crimson tears mix with blood magic. The crimson tears that heal you when drinking from flasks might have disturbing connections to blood magic practices. These tears restore health by pouring red liquid into you, and their crimson color matches the blood rivers of Mogwin Palace suspiciously. While official lore describes them as tears from the Erd tree or minor Erd trees, their visual similarity to blood and the fact that healing itself involves consuming red liquid creates uncomfortable parallels. Perhaps the Erd tree's tears incorporate blood magic principles, or maybe healing has always required consuming life essence in some form. Either interpretation suggests that even the most basic survival mechanic connects to blood sacrifice and vital force transfer. Bloodflame Blade burns life itself. Bloodflame Blade coats your weapon in red-black flames that build blood loss and deal fire damage simultaneously, representing the synthesis of fire and blood traditions. These flames don't simply burn flesh, but ignite the blood itself, causing targets to combust from within as their blood loss accelerates. The visual effect shows blood droplets floating upward from the burning weapon, as if the heat is evaporating life force directly. This fusion magic reveals connections between different outer gods and magical schools, showing how practitioners can blend seemingly separate forces when they share underlying principles. Both fire and blood represent primal violence, so combining them creates exponentially destructive results. Ancient dragons are distinct from drakes. The ancient dragons who inspired the dragon cult are fundamentally different creatures from the wyvern-like drakes scattered across the lands between. Ancient dragons possess stone scales, 4 legs, and command over red lightning rather than fire. Their very nature embodies primordial forces predating the Erd tree's dominance. The dragon cult's incantations specifically channel ancient dragon powers, rather than the lesser Drake's abilities, making these lightning spells something more profound than simple elemental magic. Ancient dragons once ruled the lands between, and the dragon cult represents humanity's attempt to preserve and access that primal authority through faith and ritual, rather than the consumption practiced by dragon communion. Fortisax became Lich Dragon, protecting Godwyn. Lich Dragon Fortisax entered the deathbed dream, attempting to cleanse Godwyn of death's corruption after his assassination. The bond between Godwyn and Fortisax ran deeper than political alliance. Fortisax genuinely cared for his friend and couldn't accept his transformation into the Prince of Death. This tragic devotion transformed Fortisax himself, as the death he battled within the dream infected his own essence. His red lightning became tainted with death magic, turning sickly green-black, and his body began showing signs of deathroot corruption. Despite this transformation, Fortisax never abandoned his vigil, continuing to fight death even as it consumed him. His fate reveals that even the mightiest ancient dragons aren't immune to corruption when exposed long enough. Lightning Spear predates Golden Order. Lightning Spear and its variants come from the ancient dragon cult, which existed before the Golden Order fully established itself. The cult worshipped ancient dragons who rule through might and primordial power, rather than faith in the Erd Tree or greater will. When Godwyn befriended Fortisax after defeating him, this unlikely alliance led to the cult's integration into Leyndell's culture. The fact that dragon cult incantations require faith, yet invoke powers older than that faith system, shows how the Golden Order absorbed and repurposed existing traditions. Lightning magic isn't holy power granted by the Erd Tree, but ancient dragon authority accessed through faith-based devotion to those older beings. Red lightning strikes from above and within. Dragon cult lightning incantations like ancient dragons. Lightning strike call down red lightning from the sky, but the power doesn't originate from atmospheric electricity. Ancient dragons command this lightning as an expression of their essential nature, making it more conceptual force than physical element. When you cast these spells, you're temporarily channeling ancient dragon essence through your body, allowing their primordial authority to manifest as lightning. The red color distinguishes it from natural yellow lightning and from the golden lightning of the Erd Tree, emphasizing its connection to beings that predated both natural law and divine order as currently understood. Dragon Bolt Blessing turns skin to stone. Dragon Bolt Blessing and similar defensive dragon cult incantations temporarily give your body properties resembling ancient dragon's stone scales. Your character's skin takes on a hardened appearance and gains significantly increased lightning resistance while the buff is active. This transformation represents temporarily becoming more like an ancient dragon, acquiring their natural toughness and elemental resistances. The spell doesn't work through traditional magical shields, but rather through fundamental alteration of flesh into something closer to living stone. This reveals that dragon cult incantations operate partly through transformation, making the caster temporarily dragon-like rather than simply granting external protection. Placidusax was once Elden Lord. Dragon Lord Placidusax ruled as an Elden Lord before the Erd Tree's current age, serving an unnamed outer god or greater power. His ruined temple in crumbling Farum Azula floats outside normal time, existing in a perpetually collapsing state that never fully ends. Placidusax himself lies in an eternal sleep, waiting for his god to return, his 5 heads reduced to 3 through ancient wounds. The dragon lightning he commands during his boss fight exceeds even other ancient dragons' power, bending space and creating paradoxical attacks that hit before they're cast. His existence proves the Erd-tree and greater will aren't unique or eternal, but rather the current dominant forces in a cosmic power struggle where ancient dragon civilization represents an earlier losing side. Gransax's lightning spear pierced Lendl. Gransax, the colossal ancient dragon, attacked Lendl during the age when the capital was still being established under Erd-tree authority. His assault represented the dragon's resistance to humanity's rising dominance under the Golden Order. Godwyn led the defense and ultimately defeated Gransax, whose massive corpse remains impaled through the city's walls as both trophy and warning. The Gransax's lightning spear incantation recreates the weapon Godwyn used in this legendary battle, making it both historical artifact and prayer. This victory secured humanity's ascendancy and led to the alliance with ancient dragons through Godwyn's friendship with Fordysax, transforming bitter war into productive peace through mutual respect earned in battle. Borealis brought freezing lightning. Borealis, the freezing fog, represents a unique ancient dragon who developed powers combining lightning with frost, creating hybrid attacks that few defenses can fully resist. His unusual abilities suggest ancient dragons weren't monolithic, but specialized in different elemental combinations based on the environment or individual nature. Borealis's lightning incantations deal both lightning and frost damage while building frostbite status, making them exceptionally dangerous. His existence in the mountaintops of the giants, rather than Farum Azula, implies he adapted to his frigid environment, or perhaps sought isolation from other dragons. The fact that his powers can be learned through dragon communion, rather than dragon cult faith, shows how different traditions access draconic power through contrasting philosophical approaches. Dragon cult armor enhances lightning. The various armor pieces associated with Dragon Cult Knights enhance Dragon Cult incantation power, showing that proper attire matters for channeling ancient dragon authority. The armor isn't simply protective, but acts as a conduit that helps focus draconic power through the wearer's body. This suggests Dragon Cult practices involve specific rituals and preparations beyond just knowing the words or gestures, requiring adherents to properly prepare themselves physically and spiritually. The knight's armor combines defense with faith enhancement, reflecting the cult's warrior-priest philosophy, where devotion to ancient dragons manifests through both combat prowess and religious devotion. Dragon-scale blade channels lightning. Naturally, the dragon-scale blade weapon comes imbued with Dragon Cult lightning power, even though it's a sword rather than a sacred seal. This demonstrates how ancient dragon essence can be bound into physical objects, creating weapons that channel draconic power without requiring active spellcasting. The blade's unique skill creates lightning bursts with each swing, seamlessly blending martial combat with elemental magic. This integration reflects the Dragon Cult's philosophy that reverence for ancient dragons should manifest in action rather than contemplation, making even warriors into active practitioners of draconic power without needing to become dedicated spellcasters. Vike's lightning spear turned yellow. Vike, who came closest to becoming Elden Lord before being consumed by frenzied flame, wielded Dragon Cult incantations, including his own version of lightning spear. However, when you face him as a boss or invader, his lightning has turned sickly yellow, corrupted by the frenzied flame's influence. This transformation reveals that even sacred lightning from ancient dragons can be tainted by stronger forces, like the frenzied flame. Vike's corruption extends beyond his mind to the very magic he channels, showing how thoroughly the three fingers embrace altered his fundamental nature. His lightning retains its destructive power, but now carries madness alongside its electrical damage. Ancient Dragon Prayer Book preserves Old Faith. The Ancient Dragon Prayer Book contains prayers to ancient dragons recorded before their alliance with Lendel fully developed, representing an older form of dragon cult practice. The prayers it unlocks are more reverent than tactical, treating ancient dragons as genuine divine beings worthy of worship, rather than allies granting power through friendship. This distinction matters because it shows how the cult's nature changed over time, moving from pure veneration toward more transactional relationships as ancient dragons integrated into the Golden Order's hierarchy. The old prayers still work, proving the underlying relationship between faith and draconic power remains valid, even as the cult's theological understanding evolved. Lanciacs taught humans lightning. Ancient Dragon. Lanciacs was among the first to befriend humans and teach them lightning incantations, making her instrumental in the dragon cult's formation. Her particular brand of lightning magic manifests as claws and spears that strike with pinpoint precision, reflecting her elegant combat style. The incantations bearing her name demonstrate how individual ancient dragons developed personalized approaches to their elemental powers, with Lanciacs favoring swift, surgical strikes over Fortisax's overwhelming area attacks. Her willingness to share draconic secrets with humans represented a controversial choice among ancient dragons, many of whom viewed humanity as inferior beings unworthy of such power. Dragon communion conflicts with dragon cult. The philosophical divide between dragon communion and dragon cult runs deeper than simple methodology differences. Dragon cult practitioners view communion's cannibalistic practices as blasphemous desecration of sacred beings, while communion adherents see the cult as naive supplicants, begging for power, rather than seizing it. This tension occasionally erupts into violence, with cult knights hunting communion practitioners and vice versa. The fact that both traditions genuinely access draconic power through completely opposite approaches reveals something fundamental about dragons themselves. They exist as forces that can be engaged with through reverence or consumption, partnership or predation, each path offering authentic but distinctly different results. Night sorceries deceive artificial intelligence. Night sorceries including Night Comet, Night Shard, and Night Maiden's Mist possess the unique property of invisibility to enemy AI. When cast, these spells produce projectiles or effects that appear fully visible to players, but don't register in enemies' threat detection systems. Bosses won't dodge, regular enemies won't raise shields, and aggressive foes won't react until the spell actually strikes them. This invisibility represents not physical transparency, but a conceptual cloaking where the magic exists outside the perceptual frameworks most creatures use to detect danger. Night sorceries exploit a blind spot in consciousness itself, making them perceptually unreal until their effects become undeniable through damage. Celia was a hidden sorcerer town. Celia, town of sorcery in Caelid, represents a community of night sorcery practitioners who deliberately hid their settlement through magical barriers. The town remains sealed behind invisible walls until you light flames in 3 towers, suggesting night sorcerers valued secrecy above accessibility. This isolation wasn't paranoia, but pragmatic recognition that their magical practices made them targets. Night sorcery's association with assassins and hunters attracted both persecution from authorities and unwanted attention from those seeking to exploit such powers. The sealing magic demonstrates that night sorcerers developed protective applications for their invisibility principles, creating barriers as conceptually unreal as their offensive spells. Night sorcerers were often assassins. Item descriptions note that Celian sorcerers were assassins and often hunted their own fellows, suggesting night sorcery schools functioned more like covert ops organizations than traditional academic institutions. The emphasis on invisibility and surprise made night magic natural fit for assassination work, where success depends on targets never detecting threats until too late. The casual mention that they often hunted their fellows implies internal conflicts were common, perhaps due to competition for contracts or ideological disputes about night magic's proper applications. This creates a disturbing picture of Celia as town of professional killers who occasionally turned on each other, maintaining uneasy peace through mutual threat rather than genuine cooperation. Unseen form makes caster nearly invisible. Unseen form is a night sorcery that dramatically reduces the caster's visibility and silences their movement, making you nearly transparent while active. This spell doesn't provide true invisibility, but rather extreme camouflage that prevents most enemies from noticing you unless you're very close or attacking. The effect works by manipulating perception similar to how Night Comet tricks enemy AI, except applied to caster's entire presence. You become perceptually unreal, existing in blind spot between attention and awareness. Guards can look directly at you, yet not register your presence, their minds unable to process information their senses should provide. This reveals night sorcery's true nature as manipulation of consciousness rather than physical reality. Unseen Blade reveals only on impact. Unseen Blade conjures an invisible sword, slash that enemies cannot detect until it strikes them. Unlike Night Comet, which has visible projectile that AI ignores, Unseen Blade is actually invisible even to players, manifesting only as sudden damage numbers and stagger effects on targets. This extreme concealment comes at cost of very short range, requiring you to position carefully for strikes to connect. The spell embodies night sorcery's philosophy of perfect ambush, where attacks should ideally remain unknown until completion. Trading range for enhanced surprise represents strategic choice night sorcerers made, accepting tactical limitations to maximize their assassination effectiveness. Night Maiden's Mist builds frostbite. Silently, Night Maiden's Mist creates a creeping fog that builds frostbite status while remaining invisible to enemy AI. Foes simply stand in the damaging mist, taking accumulating cold damage without attempting to escape, making this spell exceptional for passive damage against stationary enemies or bosses. The Night Maiden referenced in the name suggests connection to moon magic and female sorcery traditions, possibly linking this spell to ancient practices predating Raya Lucaria's formal establishment. The cold damage associates night with moon's chill and darkness's frigid nature, connecting conceptual invisibility with literal temperature effects that slow and eventually freeze targets solid. Ambush Shard materializes behind targets. Ambush Shard doesn't simply create invisible projectile, but actually manifests magical attack behind or beside your target, as if the sorcery teleported or phased through intervening space. This spatial manipulation represents advanced application of night magic's perceptual properties, where you're not just hiding attacks, but repositioning them to strike from unexpected angles. The spell proves night sorcery can affect not just detection, but actual spatial relationships, making it part of the same conceptual toolkit as gravity magic in manipulating space itself. Enemies have no defense against attacks that don't travel through normal space. hitting them from positions they logically couldn't be struck from. Celian Sealbreaker opens hidden prisons. The Celian Sealbreaker key unlocks magical barriers throughout Caelid that imprison or isolate particularly dangerous individuals or secrets. The fact that such widespread sealing magic exists suggests Celian authorities regularly needed to contain threats, possibly rogue night sorcerers or failed magical experiments. The barriers themselves use night magic principles to become conceptually impenetrable, requiring specific counters rather than simple force to breach. This defensive application shows night sorcery's versatility, proving the same principles that make attacks invisible can make barriers unbreakable. The sealed areas contain everything from hostile sorcerers to legendary spellmasters, revealing that Celia imprisoned both criminals and scholars they feared equally. Night magic predates Academy. Night sorcery traditions appear older than Raya Lucaria's formal magical education system, suggesting these techniques developed independently before academic standardization. The town of Celia and its distinct magical culture existed parallel to the Academy, rather than deriving from it, implying multiple independent discovery paths led to functional sorcery. Night sorcerers possibly developed their techniques through practical needs, like hunting and assassination, rather than theoretical research, creating empirical magical tradition focused on results over understanding. This explains why night magic lacks the elaborate theory underlying glintstone sorcery, functioning more as craft tradition passed master to student than academic discipline with published research. Rogier studied night sorceries despite risks. Sorcerer Rogier, the friendly NPC at Roundtable Hold, specialized in night sorceries despite their dangerous reputation. His aristocratic background suggests he chose this controversial path deliberately, possibly drawn by assassination magic's effectiveness or intellectual challenge of mastering perceptually unreal spells. Rogier's subsequent encounter with Godwyn's corpse beneath Stormveil and resulting death curse reflects night magic's broader connection to hidden truths and dangerous discoveries. Those who specialize in perceiving what others cannot inevitably find secrets, better left unknown. Rogier's fate serves as warning that night sorcery's power to bypass normal detection extends to uncovering realities that can destroy their discoverers. Nox civilization mastered night magic. The underground Nox civilization of Nokron and Noxtella possessed advanced night sorcery techniques before their civilization was destroyed by Greater Will for creating Fingerslayer Blade. Nox architecture incorporates perpetual starlight and darkness simultaneously, creating environments where normal vision becomes unreliable. Their most skilled warriors utilized night combat techniques that made them nearly unbeatable in their underground realm's dim conditions. The Nox's ultimate fate proves that mastery of night sorcery, while formidable, provides insufficient defense against cosmic powers that operate beyond perceptual manipulation. Even magic that makes you undetectable fails when your opponent can simply destroy everything, including spaces you might hide. Night sorcery's scale. Normally, despite uniqueness, despite their unique properties, night sorceries scale with intelligence and staff bonuses identically to other glintstone magic, suggesting the invisibility effect is refinement of standard sorcery rather than fundamentally different system. This means the night aspect represents advanced application of normal magical principles, where sorcerers learn to tune their spells' frequencies or wavelengths to occupy perceptual blind spots. Any sufficiently intelligent glintstone sorcerer could theoretically learn night techniques given proper instruction, making this specialized school accessible through education, rather than unique talent. The knowledge's concentration in Celia reflected cultural secrecy rather than inherent limitation, proving night magic's principles could spread if practitioners chose to share techniques openly. Radun mastered gravity to ride Leonard. Star Scourge. Radun learned gravity sorcery specifically to continue riding his beloved steed Leonard, despite growing to massive demigod size. This touching motivation reveals Radun's sentimental nature, despite his fearsome reputation, showing he valued his childhood companion's continued service enough to master entire school of magic. The gravity magic allows him to reduce his effective weight while riding, preventing Leonard from being crushed beneath titanic bulk. This same magic extends to his combat techniques, making gravity not just utility but integrated fighting style. Radun's arrows fly with gravity-enhanced trajectories, his weapons hit with density warping force, and his final attacks pull enemies into inescapable gravitational wells that tear flesh from bones through compression. Rock Sling summons. Actual stone. Rock Sling doesn't create illusory projectiles or transmuted matter, but literally levitates existing rocks and hurls them at enemies with gravity-enhanced velocity. The spell requires actual stone chunks to be present, automatically pulling them from the environment for ammunition. This limitation makes Rock Sling unusable in some environments lacking suitable rocks, but the spell's damage compensates through massive physical impact and stance damage that staggers enemies effectively. The rocks themselves show signs of gravity compression, appearing denser and darker than normal stone. Upon striking targets, they hit with force that should require cannon or siege weapon to generate, as gravity magic increases both velocity and effective mass during flight. Meteorite Staff cannot be upgraded. The Meteorite Staff found in Caelid begins with excellent intelligence scaling, but cannot be upgraded through smithing, remaining at base level throughout the game. This unusual limitation reflects its nature as actual meteorite fragment, rather than crafted tool. The metal comprising it fell from space long ago, already maximally dense from cosmic forces that formed it. Attempting to enhance it further would destroy its inherent properties, or prove impossible because smiths lack tools that can work material compressed by stellar gravity. Despite upgrade limitation, its high base stats and gravity sorcery enhancement make it excellent early game catalyst that remains competitive longer than most unupgraded weapons or staves. Collapsing Stars pulls enemies inward. Collapsing Stars creates a gravitational singularity that drags nearby enemies toward the caster, disrupting positioning and enabling follow-up attacks. The spell mimics how stellar bodies in death throes develop intense gravity that pulls surrounding matter into accretion disk. Enemies caught in the pull visibly struggle against the force, their movements becoming jerky and uncontrolled as they're yanked off balance. The gravity effect ignores enemy poison weight normally, affecting massive bosses and tiny enemies equally, suggesting it manipulates space-time itself rather than simply creating directional force. This makes gravity sorceries fundamentally different from wind or push effects, as they alter the geometric relationships between objects rather than simply applying force. Gravity Well creates. Crushing Zone. Gravity Well summons a purple sphere that draws in enemies before detonating in a crushing implosion. The visual effect shows space warping around the gravity point, with light bending and objects distorting as they approach event horizon. Enemies caught fully in the spell don't just take damage, but visibly compress, their bodies crushed by forces that momentarily exceed their structural capacity to resist. The spell's delayed explosion gives enemies time to be pulled into maximum damage radius, rewarding skilled placement. The purple color associates gravity magic with void or space itself, suggesting these spells don't use natural gravity, but something more exotic, possibly drawing on the same stellar forces that created glintstones when star matter rained on the lands between. Meteorite spell rains down from above. Meteorite sorcery calls down actual space debris that streaks through the atmosphere before impacting target areas with explosive force. The spell doesn't create illusory rocks, but somehow enables you to redirect genuine meteorites that exist in the lands between's orbit or between dimensions. This explains the spell's significant casting time and stamina cost. You're performing astronomical calculation and space-time manipulation to ensure meteorites arrive where needed when needed. The fiery trails and explosive impacts suggest these aren't cold rocks, but actively burning fragments that retain heat from atmospheric entry, making each hit combination of kinetic impact and incendiary explosion. Radahn's armor shows gravity stress. Radahn's armor and weapons show signs of gravitational stress, with metal warped and compressed in ways normal combat wouldn't cause. His swords appear to contain condensed gravity wells within their structure, making them simultaneously lighter to wield for him, yet impossibly heavy for others. The armor itself features unusual geometric patterns that might represent gravity manipulation symbols or functional enhancement of his natural gravity magic. When you acquire his equipment, the descriptions note these items carry residual gravity effects, suggesting Radahn's constant use of gravity sorcery permanently altered physical properties of everything he regularly touched. His entire loadout serves as proof that gravity magic, when used continuously for years, changes matter's fundamental nature. Radahn stopped the stars. Radahn's greatest feat was halting the movement of stars across the sky to forestall Ranni's fate, as her destiny was written in stellar motion. This cosmic-scale gravity manipulation required him to maintain constant magical effort, directing gravitational forces upward to counteract stellar momentum. The achievement proves gravity sorcery can affect objects at astronomical distances, not just nearby matter. Radahn's eventual defeat releases the stars, causing meteors to crash across the lands between, including the massive impact that creates path to Nokron. This reveals he wasn't simply holding stars motionless, but actually preventing their destined paths from completing, fighting fate itself through gravitational manipulation that bent space-time on continental scale. Onyx Lords are gravity incarnate. Onyx Lords are beings composed entirely of crystallized gravity, their bodies made from same stellar material that gave birth to gravity sorceries. They command gravity magic instinctively, rather than learning it through study, making their techniques purer and often more devastating than human casters. Their arrival in lands between came via meteor impacts, literally crashing to Earth from space in events that created craters still visible ages later. Fighting them means facing opponents whose every movement manipulates local gravity, whose attacks warp space itself, and whose very existence represents cosmic forces made flesh. Their eventual defeat proves gravity, while immensely powerful, still operates within rules that sufficiently determined Tarnished can exploit. Gravity sorceries cost heavy stamina. All gravity sorceries consume significantly more stamina than comparable spells from other schools, reflecting the physical strain of manipulating fundamental forces. Bending space-time, redirecting planetary masses, or creating gravitational singularities takes toll on caster's body even though the effects manifest as magical phenomena. This stamina cost creates interesting tactical consideration, where gravity mages must manage both FP for casting and stamina for the spell's physical demands. The high stamina consumption also explains why Radan required such massive physical power alongside his intelligence. Gravity sorcery rewards hybrid builds that combine mental acuity with bodily strength, as both are necessary to wield these demanding spells effectively. Alabaster Lords share gravity mastery. Alabaster Lords are counterpart to Onyx Lords, also arriving via meteor but forming from different stellar material. They command similar gravity techniques but apply them with different tactical emphasis, favoring crowd control effects over raw damage. Their existence proves that stellar sources of gravity magic are diverse, with different star types or cosmic regions producing variations in gravitational crystallization. The Lord's presence in lands between shows that cosmic beings occasionally visit or invade terrestrial realm, drawn by or emerging from stellar events that bridge space between worlds. Their magic demonstrates that gravity manipulation can become so sophisticated it transcends being just sorcery and becomes fundamental mode of existence. Meteorite of Astal evokes cosmic horror. Meteorite of Astal summons a massive meteor strike similar to Radan's most devastating attack during his boss fight. The spell channels the power of Astel, natural born of the void, a cosmic horror that fell from stars to devastate underground civilizations. Astel's existence suggests some meteorites aren't simply rock and metal, but carry malevolent intelligence that survives atmospheric entry and seeks to destroy whatever it finds upon landing. The spell's animation shows reality warping around the descending meteorite, space buckling under gravitational stress before explosive impact. Using this sorcery means temporarily channeling essence of cosmic predator that exists beyond normal life, accessing power that predates and will survive all terrestrial civilizations. Beast incantations channel primal hunger. Beast incantations originate from Gurunk, beast clergyman, who is secretly Malekith the Black Blade in disguise. These spells represent primal savage magic that predates civilized spellcasting traditions. Unlike refined religious incantations or studied sorceries, beast magic taps into hunger, territorial instinct, and survival drives that existed before language or culture. The incantation's animations show feral physicality. Casters throw rocks, claw ground, or conjure bestial roars, emphasizing how these techniques require channeling animal nature rather than intellectual understanding. This makes beast magic accessible to those with spiritual connection to wild forces, but difficult for overly civilized practitioners who've lost touch with primal instincts. Gorank's hunger grows worse. As you deliver more deathroot to Gurunk at Bestial Sanctum, his behavior becomes increasingly erratic and violent. Eventually, he attacks you in desperate frenzy before regaining composure and apologizing. This degradation reveals Gurunk's dual nature. He consumes deathroot, trying to reabsorb scattered fragments of Rune of Death stolen from him as Malekith, but each piece intensifies internal conflict between beast nature and duty. The deathroot simultaneously satisfies and agitates his hunger, creating a feedback loop where more consumption increases both relief and madness. His bestial side grows stronger with each delivered root, suggesting that beast magic might partially originate from this constant internal struggle between animal urges and divine purpose. Stone of Gurunk uses actual rocks. Stone of Gurunk is simple beast incantation that pelts enemies with conjured rocks, but these aren't magical projectiles. They're genuine stone somehow manifested or pulled from environment. The spell reflects beast magic's crude directness. Instead of elegant energy constructs, you throw rocks like frustrated ape. The physical nature of projectiles means they're affected by gravity normally and can be blocked by physical barriers, unlike some sorceries that phase through obstacles. This limitation emphasizes beast incantations' earthiness and connection to material reality rather than abstract magical principles. The stone's effectiveness, despite simplicity, proves that primal techniques can compete with sophisticated magic through raw applicability rather than theoretical elegance. Beast Claw leaves. Reality wounds. Beast Claw incantation swipes ground, creating slashing energy waves that travel toward enemies. The visual effects suggest these aren't simple projectiles, but actual rends in space left by claws that exist partially outside normal reality. The wounds persist briefly as red-black tears that damage anything crossing them, implying beast magic operates by temporarily breaking natural laws through sheer predatory will. When you cast this spell, you're not simulating beast attack, but channeling actual predatory essence that hunts independently after release. The claws seek prey with singular purpose, continuing to attack until they dissipate or find targets, embodying beast magic's relentless pursuit philosophy. Gurung's Beast Claw is enhanced version. After delivering all 9 death root to Gurung, he grants you Gurung's Beast Claw, a superior version of the basic spell that creates more and larger claw waves. This enhanced version represents Gurung's gratitude, but also his increased bestial power from consuming all that death essence. The spell's improvement isn't simply numerical, but qualitative. The claws move differently, seek targets more aggressively, and feel more predatory in execution. This proves that beast incantations can be refined not through study, but through embracing animalistic nature more completely, suggesting that the best beast magic comes from fully surrendering to savage instincts rather than attempting to civilize them. Bestial Sling weaponizes basic movement. Bestial Sling is beast magic's most basic spell, creating small stone shards and hurling them rapidly. The casting animation is remarkably casual, almost as if you're skipping stones across water rather than fighting. This informality reflects beast magic philosophy that violence should be natural as breathing, not requiring dramatic gestures or theatrical presentation. The spell's low cost and fast casting enable it to be used almost as basic attack, making it exceptional for hybrid builds that want ranged option without sacrificing melee focus. Its simplicity proves beast magic's core truth. Effectiveness matters more than aesthetics, and primal techniques refined by millions of years of predation need no elaborate theory to justify their lethality. Beast Eye indicates death root locations. When Gurung gives you the Beast Eye item, it pulses and indicates when you're near death root locations. This seemingly simple detection tool reveals something profound about beast nature. Beasts possess senses that perceive what civilized beings miss. The eye doesn't work through arcane calculation, but through instinctive connection to death essence, showing how beast magic operates on sensing and tracking rather than analysis. This gift demonstrates Gurung's trust and his recognition that you've become partial extension of his hunt for death fragments. The eye makes you temporary member of beast predator pack, sharing senses that exist beyond normal perception. Roar and howl buffs. Stack. Beast Roar family of incantations provide attack power buffs through primal vocalizations that stir aggressive instincts. Unlike many buff spells that prevent stacking, these bestial roars can be combined with other enhancements, because they work through psychological arousal rather than magical augmentation. Letting loose primal scream puts you into berserker mindset, where inhibitions fall away and pure combat instinct takes over. The roars physically stagger nearby enemies through soundwave force, proving they're not purely psychological, but blend mental effect with physical impact. This combination makes Beast Roar useful both as buff preparation and as combat tool, embodying Beast Magic's emphasis on versatility through simplicity. Malekith's Black Blade is ultimate Beast Magic. When you defeat Malekith the Black Blade and obtain his remembrance, you can create the ultimate beast incantation, Black Blade. This spell channels the very weapon that holds the rune of death, creating sweeping arcs of destined death that reduce maximum HP. The incantation proves Beast Magic's apex form doesn't abandon sophistication entirely, but rather integrates primal ferocity with divine purpose. Malekith himself represents this synthesis, a bestial warrior who serves as Queen Marika's loyal shadow-bound beast, an executioner of gods. His Black Blade technique shows that beast magic reaches its full potential when savage nature serves higher purpose rather than being suppressed by it. Beast incantations scale with strength. Unlike other incantations that scale purely with faith, beast incantations benefit from both faith and strength due to Clawmark Seal's unusual split scaling. This reflects how beast magic bridges physical combat and spiritual power, requiring brute physicality alongside divine connection. Practitioners must be strong enough to endure channeling primal forces that would overwhelm weaker bodies, making beast magic natural fit for warrior priests rather than pure clerics. The strength scaling mechanically represents how beast spells demand physical exertion, throwing stones, clawing earth, roaring with lung-straining intensity, making them exhausting to use repeatedly unless caster possesses significant bodily power backing their faith. Golden Order fundamentalism seeks perfect logic. Golden Order fundamentalism represents the attempt to understand the Erd Tree's divine power through pure logic and mathematical precision. Fundamentalists believe that if they can derive universal laws underlying reality, they can manipulate those laws directly, rather than petitioning gods for favors. This philosophical approach transforms faith into something closer to theoretical physics, treating divine power as phenomenons subject to comprehension, rather than mysterious grace. The school's incantations reflect this mindset through geometric patterns, mathematical precision, and focus on universal principles. Fundamentalists like Goldmask seek to perfect the Golden Order itself by identifying and correcting contradictions in its theological and metaphysical structure. Golden Vow affects entire party. Golden Vow incantation increases attack power and defense for you and all allies in cooperative play, reflecting Golden Order philosophy that proper faith should strengthen community rather than just individual. The golden glow that surrounds affected characters visualizes Erdtree grace flowing through them, temporarily elevating their capabilities through direct divine enhancement. Mechanically, this makes Golden Vow one of most universally useful buff incantations, applicable to every build and every situation where you want improved performance. Thematically, it represents how Golden Order presents itself, as benevolent force lifting all believers together rather than selectively empowering chosen few. Litany of Proper Death nullifies undead. Litany of Proper Death creates Golden Seal that dramatically reduces undead enemies' offensive and defensive capabilities, representing fundamentalist approach to death mechanics. Rather than simply dealing holy damage that undead are weak to, This spell enforces proper order on those who live in death by reminding reality that they should have died completely. The mathematical precision of fundamentalist theology identifies their existence as error in reality's code and temporarily corrects that error, making them vulnerable and weak. This reveals Golden Order's core philosophy that proper death isn't cruel, but necessary for maintaining reality's coherent structure, and that preventing death or delaying it properly creates cascading problems requiring correction. Radagon's rings trap enemies in light. Radagon's rings of light creates expanding golden circles that persist briefly and damage enemies crossing them. The geometric precision of perfect circles represents fundamentalist obsession with mathematical forms underlying reality. These rings don't simply hurt through radiant damage, but constrain enemies through establishing boundaries they physically cannot cross easily, as if the golden light solidifies space itself temporarily. The spell proves Golden Order fundamentalism can create tangible effects through proper application of universal laws, showing that mathematical theology isn't merely intellectual exercise, but practical magical system when properly understood. Golden Order Seal rewards split investment. Golden Order Seal uniquely scales, with both intelligence and faith simultaneously, representing how fundamentalism synthesizes religious devotion with intellectual rigor. This unusual scaling makes the seal weak at low levels, but eventually outperforming pure faith seals when both stats are highly developed. The design reflects fundamentalist philosophy that neither faith alone nor reason alone suffices. Only their synthesis produces complete understanding. Players using this seal essentially embody Goldmask's ideal of faith informed by logic, achieving greater power than possible through single-minded devotion or pure intellectualism. Elden Stars summons Homing Divinity. Elden Stars is legendary incantation that creates golden apparition resembling Elden Beast itself, which slowly homes toward enemies while releasing smaller projectile bolts continuously. The spell channels directly from Elden Ring's power, making it essentially fragment of reality's fundamental structure, weaponized as incantation. Its legendary status and high faith requirement reflect this divine origin. You're not simply casting spell, but temporarily manifesting piece of cosmic order in physical realm. The slow, inevitable approach of the main projectile represents how Golden Order's influence spreads inexorably, patient but unstoppable, eventually reaching all corners of existence regardless of resistance. Law of causality reflects projectiles. Law of causality creates golden aura that automatically reflects projectiles back toward attackers, representing fundamentalist principle that actions have consequences and violence rebounds on those initiating it. This protective spell doesn't absorb damage through barriers, but rather enforces cosmic law of causality, making attacks return to their origin as natural consequence of breaking proper order. The spell proves Golden Order magic operates on completely different principles than traditional barriers or shields, functioning more like enforcing natural laws than creating defensive obstacles. This philosophical difference makes fundamentalist protection distinctly powerful against ranged attacks, while offering no defense against melee strikes that don't involve projectiles to redirect. Golden Order Greatsword is manifested faith. When obtained from Mending Rune of Perfect Order, the Golden Order Greatsword demonstrates fundamentalism's ability to manifest pure faith as physical weapons. The blade consists entirely of golden light, structured through mathematical precision, existing as much as concept as metal. Its weapon skill creates explosive waves of holy power that embody fundamentalist philosophy of faith backed by reasoned force. The sword proves Golden Order doesn't simply preach peace, but maintains its authority through violence when necessary, with that violence justified through theological framework that presents force as regrettable necessity rather than first resort. Regression and causality are fundamental laws. The incantations law of regression and law of causality represent two fundamental laws Goldmask discovered underlying all reality. Regression describes tendency of complex systems to return to simpler states, while causality ensures actions produce consequences. Together, they form foundation for entire Golden Order worldview. That reality operates through comprehensible rules which, once understood, can be manipulated precisely. Goldmask's revelation was that these laws operated before Erdtree and Greater Will, suggesting they're more fundamental than any god, making perfect understanding of them potentially more powerful than any divine patron's blessings. Triple Rings of Light show mastery. Triple Rings of Light is advanced version of Radagon's spell that creates 3 concentric golden circles instead of 1, demonstrating refined fundamentalist technique. The spell's increased complexity requires significantly more faith to cast and consumes more FP, reflecting how fundamentalist magic scales with theological sophistication. Creating 3 perfect interlocking geometric forms simultaneously proves casters' complete mastery over mathematical principles underlying Golden Order magic. The spell serves as final exam for fundamentalist practitioners, marking transition from student to master of the Golden Order's most rigorous magical discipline. Renala commands the full moon. Renala's full moon is legendary sorcery that creates and launches massive spectral moon at enemies, dealing heavy damage while reducing their magic resistance. The spell manifests Renala's personal connection to celestial moon that blessed her, union with Radagon, making it as much manifestation of her royal authority as magical technique. When she casts this in her boss fight, the sheer scale and power communicate why she once ruled Liurnia absolutely, combining political authority with magical supremacy that made challenge to her reign unthinkable. The moon's physical presence eclipsing entire battlefield symbolizes how Renala's power was once absolute, casting everything else into shadow. Dark moon reduces magic resistance. Further, Rani's dark moon represents evolution or corruption of Renala's full moon, manifesting as cold dark sphere instead of silvery luminescence. This spell also inflicts frostbite status alongside its damage, suggesting Rani's rejection of Golden Order included embracing colder, more distant cosmic forces. The enhanced magic resistance reduction makes subsequent spells more effective, creating tactical advantage through proper setup. Thematically, the Dark Moon symbolizes Rani's entire philosophy, rejecting warm golden light of Erdtree for cold distant guidance that frees people from divine intervention, while also removing divine comfort and reassurance. Carrion royalty married Academy Masters. Renala's authority derived from her political position as Carian Queen, but solidified through marriage to Radagon, who himself came from divine lineage as secret aspect of Queen Marika. This union between Carian royal house and Golden Order created stable period where magic and faith coexisted peacefully. The Academy flourished under this arrangement, with Carian protection enabling sorcerers to pursue research without external interference. However, when Radagon abandoned Renala to rejoin Marika, this alliance shattered, destabilizing Liurnia politically and psychologically devastating Renala personally. Her subsequent mental breakdown left Academy without effective leadership, enabling dangerous experiments and factional conflict to spread unchecked. Moon sorceries require massive intelligence. Both full moon spells require intelligence of 70, marking them among the most demanding sorceries in the game. This massive requirement reflects genuine magical complexity rather than artificial barrier. Manipulating celestial bodies, even in spectral form, requires understanding cosmic forces at deepest level. The intelligence investment represents years of study, natural brilliance, and personal transformation required to comprehend how moons affect reality and how to manifest those effects through sorcery. Few sorcerers ever achieve this level of mastery, making moon spells genuinely rare even among Raya Lucaria's graduates. The high cost ensures moon magic remains elite discipline accessible only to most dedicated practitioners. Moons debuff before dealing damage. Mechanically, moon sorceries apply their magic resistance reduction before calculating their own damage, meaning the debuff increases even the initial cast's effectiveness. This timing represents how moons fundamentally alter local magical conditions rather than simply hitting hard. When moon manifests in area, it changes how magic interacts with matter itself, creating an environment where subsequent spells penetrate defenses more easily. This makes moon sorceries excellent openers for sustained magical assault, functioning as both heavy damage and force multiplier that enables follow-up attacks to exceed their normal potential. Rani's questline spans entire game. Rani the Witch's questline requires you to traverse nearly every region, defeat multiple major bosses, and solve cryptic puzzles to help her achieve godhood through Dark Moon guidance. This epic journey reveals how deeply moon magic connects to broader cosmology, as Rani's plan requires Fingerslayer Blade capable of killing outer god emissaries, showing moon sorceries operate on divine power scales. Her transformation into Dark Moon Goddess at questline's end suggests moon magic isn't simply spell school, but pathway to apotheosis, where mastering celestial forces enables transcendence beyond mortality. The dark moon she gifts you represents her blessing, making you agent of her new age, guided by cold distant stars rather than warm intrusive gods. Carrion Phalanx summons spectral blades. Carrion Phalanx conjures floating swords of glintstone that hover around caster before launching at enemies who approach. These aren't physical weapons but manifestations of Carrion House's martial magic tradition, where royal sorcerers combine spellcasting with swordsmanship. The Phalanx formation reflects military organization, treating magic as organized force rather than wild power. The delayed trigger mechanic creates tactical depth, allowing you to set up defenses before engaging enemies. Thematically, the orbiting blades represent how Carrion magic incorporates structure and discipline, transforming magical potential into precise instruments that await command patiently. This organized approach distinguished Carrion traditions from Academy's more experimental chaos. Adula was Rani's personal guardian. Adula, the glintstone dragon who serves Rani, represents rare alliance between ancient dragon and sorcerer. Adula's unique glintstone breath weapons and sword-like blade attacks show how prolonged exposure to moon magic affected this dragon's nature, transforming elemental breaths into crystalline projectiles. The dragon's loyalty to Rani specifically, rather than Carrion House, generally suggests personal bond transcending political alliance, possibly earned through Rani saving Adula or vice versa. Adula's Moonblade incantation channels this dragon's power, combining draconic might with lunar sorcery in hybrid form, showing how different magical traditions can merge through genuine cooperation rather than forcible integration. Carrion Slicer requires extreme close range. Carrion Slicer's exceptionally short range seems like weakness until you realize it represents Carrion, philosophy about courage. The spell forces mages to fight at melee distance, abandoning traditional spellcaster safety of ranged combat. This dangerous proximity embodies Carrion ideal that true power requires accepting risk, meeting enemies face to face rather than hiding behind magical bombardment. The spell's low cost and fast execution compensate for danger, allowing rapid successive strikes that overwhelm defenses. Carrion Royal Knights wielded physical swords alongside magic precisely because their culture valued martial courage as highly as intellectual prowess, making Slicer's design reflect deeper cultural values about proper conduct for magical warriors. Carrion Greatsword manifests. Massive Blade. Carrion Greatsword takes Slicer's concept to extreme, creating swords so large it requires wide overhead swing that covers massive area. The spell costs significantly more FP and casts slower than Slicer, but deals proportionally increased damage and stance break. This represents Carrion magic at its most aggressive, abandoning all subtlety for overwhelming force delivered through elegant technique. The Greatsword's blue-white glow matches Carrion royal colors, making each swing declaration of royal authority enforced through magical might. Advanced Carrion sorcerers learn to chain Slicer into Greatsword, creating combo attacks that blend speed with power, embodying how Carrion traditions emphasize adaptable mastery over specialized focus. Moon magic connects to cosmic destiny. Moon sorcery's descriptions frequently reference fate, destiny, and cosmic influence beyond mere magical effect. Moons in lands between aren't simply celestial bodies, but active forces that shape events through gravitational influence on possibilities themselves. This metaphysical weight explains why Ruddan, holding stars motionless, could forestall Rani's fate. He literally prevented cosmic forces from completing their predestined motions. Moon sorcerers who master these spells don't simply cast powerful magic, but partially step outside normal causation, accessing perspective from which they can perceive and potentially alter destiny's flow. This makes moon magic fundamentally different from other schools, operating on timeline itself, rather than merely affecting present moment. Rani abandoned her Empyrean body. Rani's ascension required her to discard physical form entirely, existing only as spirit inhabiting doll body afterward. This extreme sacrifice shows moon magic's ultimate lesson about detachment. True power comes from releasing worldly concerns, including attachment to flesh itself. Her spectral existence enables her to pursue godhood without greater will's control, since she no longer possesses Empyrean body it could influence. The doll she inhabits was crafted by her mentor, showing even moon sorcerers require physical anchors despite philosophical commitment to detachment. Her transformation proves that moon magic's path leads beyond humanity entirely, toward existence as cold and distant as celestial bodies that inspire it. Carrion Retaliation turns spells into swords. Carrion Retaliation parries enemy sorceries and incantations, transforming their energy into glintstone swords that fire back at attackers. This defensive spell embodies Carrion philosophy about turning opponents' strength against them through superior technique. The transformation of hostile magic into Carrion blades shows how their sorcery can subsume other traditions, rewriting foreign spells in Carrion language. This ability to counter magic with magic proves Carrion traditions developed not in isolation, but through continuous conflict with rival sorcerers, refining defensive techniques until they became viable offensive responses. The instant counterattack timing rewards skillful use, making retaliation spell that separates masters from students. Glintstone stars replaced Renala's students. After Renala's mental breakdown, she began rebirthing Academy students as inferior copies using amber egg Radagon left to her. The glintstone-headed students who serve her aren't naturally born, but magically created through this process, explaining their strange appearance and mindless loyalty. This disturbing practice shows how completely Renala's grief broke her, turning motherhood into obsessive ritual that produces more students to replace her lost family. The rebirthed students serve as tragic evidence that moon magic gone wrong creates horrors rivaling any dark sorcery, as Renala's power without mental stability generated mockeries of life rather than genuine beings. Darkmoon Greatsword is ultimate Carian weapon. The Darkmoon Greatsword obtained from Rani represents pinnacle of Carian magical weaponsmithing, a legendary sword passed through generations that served as symbol of Carian authority. Its moonlight blade deals pure magic damage, while its weapon skill releases waves of freezing moonlight that embody everything Carian magic stands for: elegance, power, and cold, distant authority that doesn't negotiate or compromise. The sword's presence in multiple From Software games suggests it transcends individual settings, existing as platonic ideal of what magical greatsword should be. Wielding it makes you inheritor of Carian legacy, carrying forward tradition that synthesize swordsmanship and sorcery into inseparable art. Firemonk incantations channel Giant's flame. Firemonk incantations draw power from the fell god of the fire giants, an outer god whose influence predates the Erd Tree. The fire monks once served Erd Tree, but secretly maintained worship of this elder flame deity, creating heretical hybrid tradition. Their flame appears distinctly orange-red compared to normal fire, suggesting it carries properties beyond simple combustion. When casting these incantations, you channel ancient giants' fury that once threatened to burn world entire before Marika's conquest. The fire monk's imprisonment shows Golden Order, recognized threat posed by alternative fire traditions that might challenge Erd Tree's supremacy through older divine authority. Mesmer's flame burns away. Grace. Mesmer the Impaler wields unique black-red flame that can permanently burn away Erd Tree grace from souls, making his fire fundamentally different from all other flame sources. This abyssal flame represents ultimate rejection of Golden Order, capable of severing connection between greater will and its chosen. Mesmer himself stands as cursed figure whose flame serves divine purpose through unholy means, making him both tool of gods and proof of their cruelty. His flame's serpentine imagery connects it to base serpent, suggesting this fire predates even fire giants, drawing on primordial serpent deity that existed before current world order. The dark flame doesn't simply kill, but unmakes, erasing grace-touched souls from Erd Tree's cycle entirely. Magma sorceries blend fire and earth. Magma sorceries like Magma Shot and Gelmir's Fury combine fire's destructive power with earth's solidity, creating semi-liquid projectiles that persist after impact. This unique fusion makes magma magic distinct from both pure fire incantations and earth-based spells, occupying hybrid category that few practitioners master. The molten rock requires extremely high temperatures to maintain liquid state, suggesting these sorceries generate heat exceeding normal flames. Mount Gelmir's volcanic environment provides ideal research conditions for developing magma techniques, as ambient heat and flowing lava offer constant reference materials. Magma sorcerers who study there gradually acclimate to temperatures that would kill ordinary researchers, their bodies adapting to withstand proximity to forces they channel. Rykard's magma merged with serpent. When Rykard fed himself to god-devouring serpent, his consciousness merged with creature while his magic transformed surrounding area into magma-filled hellscape. The volcano manor's interior shows this fusion's results. Stone melting into lava, architecture warping from heat, and serpent scales developing flame properties. Rykard's own sorceries became grotesque hybrids where magma takes on semi-living qualities, suggesting his transformation didn't cleanly separate man from beast, but created something entirely new. The magma weaponized through his remembrance carries traces of both human ambition and serpentine hunger, making spells derived from him fundamentally corrupted by unnatural fusion. Burno Flame invokes Fell God. Burno Flame is incantation that creates massive pillar of flame that erupts from caster's position, embodying Fire Giant's destructive legacy. The spell's immense area damage and lengthy duration suggest it doesn't simply produce fire, but temporarily tears open connection to Fell God's realm, allowing eternal flame to pour through momentarily. Giants who use this magic could devastate entire armies, making them existential threat to Erdtree that required total genocide to neutralize. The spell's survival despite Fire Giant's extinction proves their magic transcended individual practitioners, existing as reproducible technique that outlasts race that developed it. Flame of the Fell God summons living fire. Flame of the Fell God summons spherical fireball that rolls across ground like sentient entity, suggesting Fell God's flame possesses quasi-consciousness. The fireball actively seeks enemies and explodes when it contacts them, or after rolling certain distance, displaying behavior more typical of creature than spell effect. This semi-alive quality distinguishes Fell God's flame from normal fire, marking it as divine force with agency rather than simple elemental phenomenon. The flame's orange color and rolling motion might represent Fell God's eye-roaming battlefield seeking targets, making each cast temporary manifestation of that deity's malevolent attention focused on destruction. Black Flame was sealed with destined death. Black Flame incantations draw power from Godskin apostles and channel essence of destined death before it was sealed away. These flames appear black with reddish highlights and possess unique property of continuously damaging enemies based on percentage of maximum health, making them exceptionally effective against high HP targets. The Black Flame's power to harm gods made Godskin cult serious threat until Malekith defeated their leader, the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Sealing destined death diminished Black Flame's true power, leaving only echoes of what once made it supreme tool for deicide. Current Black Flame incantations represent fragments of far more potent original, enough to hint at devastating capabilities when flame burned at full strength. Godslayer's Greatsword channels. Black Flame. Godslayer's Greatsword exemplifies how Black Flame was weaponized against divine beings, its coiled blade design mimicking flame's twisting motion. The weapon's skill releases spiraling black fire that lingers and burns continuously, demonstrating how Black Flame techniques were refined for sustained damage rather than quick kills. Godskin apostles wielded these blades in their god-hunting campaigns, using percentage-based damage to overcome divine durability that resisted conventional weapons. The sword's mere existence as god-killing tool proves that divinity in Lands Between isn't absolute immunity, but rather extreme resilience that specialized techniques can overcome. Giant's Flame. Take thee burns. Continuously. Giant's Flame. Take Thee creates an enormous pillar of fire that persists far longer than most flame spells, representing Fire Giant's philosophy that destruction should be thorough and complete. The spell's massive FP cost and long cast time reflect how giant-scale magic operates on different principles than human spellcasting, prioritizing overwhelming power over efficiency. The lingering flames don't simply burn, but seem to curse ground itself, making affected areas hostile long after initial cast. This persistence embodies Fire Giant's approach to war. They didn't fight quick skirmishes, but waged campaigns of total annihilation, where battlefields themselves became permanently scarred. Fire incantations stack with flame buffs. Fire damage from incantations benefits from multiple buff sources including Flame Grant, Me Strength, Fire Scorpion Charm, and Flame Shrouding Crack Tear, allowing firecasters to achieve extreme damage through proper buff stacking. This multiplicative scaling makes fire builds capable of dealing damage comparable to or exceeding other element types, despite fire's commonness making it seem less special. The variety of fire traditions, Giant's Flame, Mesmer's Flame, Black Flame, Magma, ensures firecasters have diverse tactical options while maintaining consistent mechanical benefits. Fire's fundamental destructive nature transcends specific traditions, making thermal damage universally effective regardless of which flame deity or source you channel. Mesmer's Orb channels Abyssal Flame. Mesmer's Flame of Ruin creates orb of writhing dark flame that can be thrown or detonated manually, representing his unique control over flame that serves divine extermination purposes. The spell's dark coloration and serpentine movements show how his personal curse transformed fire itself, making his flames fundamentally different from even Fell God's eternal flame. Mesmer wields flame as tool of mercy killing, burning away grace to spare souls from greater suffering under broken golden order. This twisted compassion makes his fire simultaneously act of violence and liberation, embodying contradictions that define his character as cursed son, performing evil deeds for righteous mother. Burn status deals damage. Over time, fire damage from weapons, spells, or environmental sources can inflict burn status that deals fire damage over time independent of initial strike. This creates tactical consideration where rapid fire attacks matter as much as individual damage, because building burn inflicts persistent damage that continues working after you've moved to other targets or defensive positions. Burn's percentage-based damage makes it scale with enemy health pools, giving fire builds inherent advantage against bosses and large enemies. The status's existence separate from immediate damage shows that fire in Lands Between operates partially as living force that continues consuming flesh, rather than simple thermal energy that disperses quickly. Fire Prelate Armor enhances fire. Fire Prelate armor worn by Volcano Manor's guardians enhances fire incantations and provides extreme fire resistance, showing how specialized equipment can transform firecasters into walking infernos immune to their own heat. The armor's design incorporates braziers and flame imagery, suggesting it doesn't simply protect from fire, but actively channels it through wearer's body. Fire prelates who wore this armor for years underwent physical transformation, their flesh hardening from constant heat exposure until they became partially fireproof through adaptation rather than just equipment. This demonstrates that mastering fire magic in Lands Between requires physiological change, accepting transformation as price for wielding destructive thermal forces safely.